I'm hanging Christmas lights along the roofline when their voices drift up through the open garden window below. Mom's words carry clearly in the crisp December air. She thinks she's securing her future with those tools, Patricia says with a laugh that cuts through me deeper than the Oregon winter. Once the property transfer is finalized, she'll be out. Though I'll admit, she's always been skilled with her hands. At least we received a complete renovation at no cost, Savannah responds, her tone equally dismissive. My hammer tumbles from my grasp, clattering down the shingles. I remain motionless, Christmas lights wrapped around my fingers like colorful serpents. 3 years of renovations, $64,700 of my personal investment, countless weekends sacrificed, all because Dad had promised me equity in our family home when I returned to help Mom through her medical crisis. Callie, is everything all right up there? Mom calls, her voice suddenly concerned and sweet. I force steadiness into my voice despite my racing heart. Fine, just drop my hammer. Please be careful, sweetheart. We wouldn't want you to fall and injure yourself. The concern sounds authentic, but now I recognize what lies beneath. The same tone she'd use if a hired contractor had an accident on her property. My thoughts return to 5 years earlier. Dad sitting across from me in my apartment, looking uncomfortable in his tweed jacket, too warm for the cramped space. Your mother needs your help, Callie, he had said, his economist's eyes calculating behind his glasses. Move back home, assist with her medical appointments, and you'll receive a portion of the house. It's only equitable. I believed him completely. I packed up my thriving construction business and relocated to Eugene. When Mom began suggesting renovations for the family's benefit, I offered my expertise and finances willingly. Her request that I cover vacation expenses and medical bills seemed reasonable, given the promised equity as compensation. That evening, I meticulously photograph every renovation receipt and email exchange with my father. My fingers shake as I organize them into digital folders on my laptop, my ears alert to the creak of floorboards in the hallway. The door opens and Mom enters gracefully with a teacup, her silk robe rustling around her ankles. Still working? You're constantly at that computer or wielding a hammer. Why not join us in the living room? Savannah and Garrett are sharing their vacation photographs. I close my laptop with deliberate control, just ensuring everything's properly documented for the family records. My voice surprises me with its steadiness. She places the tea beside me, with a smile that fails to reach her eyes. Always so meticulous. Savannah was just commenting on how proud we are that you've maintained your little carpentry hobby throughout the years. My throat constricts. It's not a hobby, Mom. It's a legitimate business, a successful one. Naturally, dear. She pats my shoulder dismissively, though not quite like Garrett's law practice. Now that's a respectable profession. Savannah certainly made an excellent choice, a dependable provider. I think of the check I wrote last month for Mom's cruise. The renovation costs now totaling exactly $64,700, the equity I was promised as sole compensation for 3 years of labor. I provide quite adequately. I say quietly. For yourself, perhaps. Mom straightens a photograph of Savannah on my nightstand. But Savannah is establishing a family that requires stability, a true legacy. You understand, don't you? For the first time, I notice how her smile never reaches her eyes when addressing me. How it never has. I've been so focused on seeking approval that I miss the calculation behind every interaction. I understand completely, I reply, and realize I finally do. They have no idea what I plan to do next. The following day, I stand frozen in Patricia's home office, my fingertips still touching her laptop keyboard. The screen displays evidence I was never meant to discover. My vacation fund of $18,000 transferred to an account labeled Patricia's Personal. My knuckles turn white as I grip the kitchen counter, waves of nausea forcing me to breathe deeply. But it's the document titled Property Transfer that truly steals my breath. Savannah's name highlighted in bright yellow, mine crossed out with a thick digital line. No equity, no ownership, nothing for my $64,700 investment or the thousands of hours spent renovating. Another document catches my attention. Renovation documentation. I open it to find every improvement I've made listed as donated labor, with zero financial value assigned. Mom has been orchestrating this for years while encouraging me to invest more of my savings, time, and life. A floorboard creaks in the hallway. I quickly close the laptop and move toward the kitchen sink, grabbing a glass just as Patricia appears around the corner. "What are you doing in here?" Her tone remains light, but her eyes narrow slightly. "Just getting some water." The glass trembles slightly in my hand. "I thought you and Savannah were shopping today." Change of plans. She smooths her cashmere sweater. "Garrett joined us for lunch instead. He's with Savannah in the living room now." "All three of you home early? How convenient." The words escape before I can stop them. Patricia's smile tightens. "We need to discuss some family matters. Join us in my office." The walk down the hallway feels like a march toward execution. When I enter the office, the power dynamic is unmistakable. Patricia sits behind her desk, while Savannah and Garrett stand beside her like loyal guards. Family photos featuring exclusively Savannah gleam from the polished surface. I notice my construction awards hastily shoved behind some books. "Callie, dear, we need to discuss the house," Patricia begins. "What about it?" I maintain steady composure despite my pounding heart. "Well, these lovely improvements you've been making." Patricia waves dismissively at the custom shelving I installed last month. "While we appreciate your hobby work." "This isn't hobby work." The words taste bitter on my tongue. Garrett steps forward, all tailored suit and practiced smile. "What your mother means is that we've been documenting all renovations as voluntary family contributions." He slides a folder toward me. "Legally speaking, there's no financial obligation to you. We're actually planning to sell next year," Savannah adds, avoiding my eyes. "The renovations you've completed will significantly increase the asking price." "Selling?" "But Dad promised me." "Your father isn't here," Patricia interrupts, "and verbal promises aren't legally binding, are they, Garrett?" "Not without substantial documentation," he confirms with a satisfied nod. Patricia folds her hands neatly on the desk. "You've always been skilled with your hands, dear, but this is a family decision, and Savannah is starting a real family." My gaze drifts to Patricia's partially open drawer where a folder labeled Dean peeks out, my father's college friend. Another piece of the puzzle falls into place. "So, I lose $64,700 in renovation costs and receive nothing in return." My voice sounds distant to my own ears. Patricia's smile doesn't waver. "You lived here rent-free, dear. While renovating a house I was promised partial ownership of," I counter. Garrett's expression hardens. "Callie, I strongly suggest you accept this gracefully. I'd hate to see complications arise with your construction business, permits, licensing issues." The threat hangs heavy between us. "And honestly," Patricia adds, "you really should establish your own residence at your age." This arrangement was always temporary. The full weight of their betrayal crashes down. 3 years of weekends and evenings spent renovating instead of building my own life. My retirement plans destroyed without the promised equity. The crushing realization that I've always been an outsider in this family, useful for what I could provide but never truly valued. "I'll need time to consider this," I managed to say, backing toward the door. "Don't overthink it, Callie," Savannah says softly. "It's simply business." Simply business. The renovation of our childhood home, the family legacy I thought I was preserving, reduced to a transaction where I'm the only one losing. Later, alone in my truck, I open my laptop with trembling hands. A notification appears. Cloud backup complete. I click through to my archive and there it is, an email from Dad dated 3 years ago. "As discussed, your investment of labor and materials in the Eugene property will be compensated with 30% equity upon completion of major renovations." Saved automatically. Backed up. Legal evidence of the agreement. As I sit in my truck that evening, staring at the house I'd poured my heart into, I wonder whether I should confront them immediately with what I know or gather more evidence first. Immediate confrontation might force them to retreat, but patience might reveal the full extent of their betrayal. What would you do when the people who should love you most see you only for what you can provide? I finish installing the last shelf bracket, admiring how the custom built-ins transform the previously empty wall in Savannah's former bedroom. 3 days of work, perfectly executed. As I collect my tools, the mail slot downstairs clatters. "Callie, there's a letter for you." Mom's voice floats up from the entryway. Looks important. Wiping sawdust from my hands, I descend to find Mom holding a cream-colored envelope, her perfect fingernails tapping against the paper as she studies the return address. "It's from Harmon and Associates," she says, extending it with a smile that makes my stomach clench. "Probably nothing significant, but we should discuss the house's future soon. I've invited Richard, you remember our state attorney, for dinner next Thursday, just to organize everything properly." I take the envelope, noting how she emphasizes our state attorney. "Why Thursday specifically?" "The entire family will be here, even your cousins from Portland. Everyone's concerned we're delaying progress on finalizing arrangements." Progress, as if my 3 years of work are an inconvenient obstacle. That afternoon, I find Savannah in the newly renovated sunroom, the one I'd spent 6 weekends crafting with custom window seats and built-in planters. She's directing a delivery man carrying an antique writing desk. "Right there," she instructs, pointing to the corner where my drafting table stands. "The old one can go to the garage." "My drafting table?" "Where I've designed every improvement to this house," I say, blocking the delivery man's path. Savannah looks at me as if I've tracked mud across her clean floor. "Mom said we could update this room now that you're nearly finished, Garrett, and I will be using it as a study." Later that week, I overhear Garrett on the phone in the kitchen I renovated, leaning against the island I built by hand from reclaimed oak. The kitchen's nearly perfect, but that center island doesn't match our vision. We'll probably replace it once everything's settled. Should fetch a good price though, custom work. He chuckles, his eyes flicking toward me as I stand frozen in the doorway. Handcrafted rustic charm and all that. Mrs. Hanley from next door corners me while I'm loading lumber into my truck the following day. "Your mother mentioned you're finally moving on," she says, patting my arm. "Such a shame. We've all noticed how much work you've invested in that old house. But I suppose it's time you had your own place." My grip tightens on the 2x4 until splinters bite into my palm. That night, I discover my toolbox, rearranged again. The precision squares I always keep on the left are now on the right. My measuring tapes are tangled, my favorite hammer missing entirely. I find it later in the garden shed, the handle mysteriously sticky. Sleep becomes impossible. I wake hourly, heart pounding, convinced I hear someone near my truck. I triple-check the padlock on my toolbox before bed, then check again at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. Monday morning, I find the renovation plans for the master bathroom, the final major project soaked through. The elaborate tile design I'd sketched by hand is reduced to bleeding ink. "Oh dear," Mom says, holding a dripping coffee mug. "How clumsy of me. You'll have to redraw them." That evening, I install a small motion-activated camera in my truck's cab. The next morning, another in my bedroom doorway. By week's end, I have timestamps documenting every accidental tool relocation, every misplaced invoice. While searching for backup renovation plans in Dad's old office, I discover a shoebox hidden behind his reference books. Inside are yellowed envelopes addressed to Mom in unfamiliar handwriting, dozens spanning 20 years. The return address reads Dean Harrington. The first letter I open contains details of a weekend in Cannon Beach. The dates align perfectly with Dad's economics conference from my childhood. The second describes financial arrangements. I don't need to read more to understand everything. At the lumber yard on Tuesday, Frank squeezes my shoulder as I inspect a shipment of cedar planks. "Your dad stopped by yesterday," he whispers, glancing around to ensure privacy. "Asked about material costs for everything you've done. Said it was time he knew the truth." Thursday evening arrives with the scent of Mom's signature roast filling the kitchen. I enter to find her arranging white roses in a crystal vase, the one I carefully restored after finding it cracked in the attic. "I hope you're not planning to create a disturbance tonight," she says without looking up. "This house was never going to be yours. You were simply helping family, as a daughter should." My hands remain steady as I place my tool belt on the counter. Family doesn't exploit family. I've been a contractor to you, not a daughter. She sighs dramatically. "You're being overly emotional. This is exactly why we couldn't trust you with inheritance matters." The words struck me like sledgehammer blows, but for the first time, they didn't leave lasting wounds. A strange clarity washed over me, I didn't need her approval. I never had. I'd built homes for complete strangers who treated me with more respect than my own family ever did. That ends tonight, I said quietly. Frank arrived first, carrying a leather portfolio filled with detailed records of every material purchased through my supply yard for the Monroe property renovations from 2022 through 2025. Complete with current market valuations, he announced, handing me the thick binder with a knowing wink. My business partner Megan followed close behind with her professional photographer, ready to document each renovation with comprehensive before and after comparisons. Watching Mom's expression change as strangers methodically cataloged her home made every splinter I'd ever pulled from my fingers worth it. For the first time in years, I stood at my full height in this house. When Mom tried her usual dismissive glance, I held her gaze steadily until she was forced to look away. Back in my bedroom, I assembled my digital portfolio, every invoice, screenshot of conversations with Dad promising equity, and a detailed spreadsheet breaking down all $64,700 in renovation costs. 3 years of exploitation, documented with the same precision I used to level foundation beams. Just before 7, I slipped downstairs to peek through the dining room door. They were already seated around the table I'd refinished by hand. Dad sat at the head, his face grim as he reviewed a stack of documents. He didn't even look up when Mom called his name. I took a deep breath and walked forward, laptop tucked under my arm, ready for the battle I'd unknowingly spent 3 years preparing for. With Dad's support, they would finally see who I really was. I arranged my documentation in precise order, each paper and photograph like ammunition in my arsenal. Dad remained seated at the head of the dining table I'd lovingly refinished last winter, his face a roadmap of disappointment. Mom and Savannah entered together, their matching confident smiles faltering when they spotted him there. "Charles," Mom said, her voice honey-sweet but trembling around the edges. "We weren't expecting you until 7. I imagine there are quite a few things you weren't expecting, Patricia," Dad replied, adjusting his glasses, a gesture I'd witnessed thousands of times before important lectures. The estate attorney, Mr. Pemberton, glanced between them, clearly sensing the mounting tension. Garrett followed behind Savannah, clutching his lawyer's briefcase like a protective shield. I cleared my throat and opened my laptop. Since we're all here to discuss the family property, I've prepared a comprehensive overview of my contributions. I connected my computer to the television I'd installed during my second year of renovations. The screen flickered to life, displaying a detailed spreadsheet showing every renovation date, cost, and corresponding increase in property value. As you can see, I've invested exactly $64,700 of my personal funds, I said, my voice emerging steady and professional, the same tone I used when presenting bids to clients. Additionally, these improvements have increased the property value by 43%, according to 3 independent appraisals. I clicked through photographs, dramatic before and after shots of each transformed space. The kitchen with its custom island. The master bathroom with the marble shower surround I'd installed piece by piece over 6 weekends. The wraparound porch that had previously sagged but now stood as the neighborhood's crown jewel. With each image, Mr. Pemberton removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose thoughtfully. Garrett shifted uncomfortably in his chair, whispering urgently to Savannah, whose smirk had completely vanished. "Most importantly," I said, clicking to the final slide, "I have Dad's written email promising me equity in exchange for returning home and completing these renovations." Mom stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. Kelly has always had emotional problems. She's misunderstood family conversations." "Patricia," Dad's voice cut through the room like a table saw. "I've been conducting my own investigation into the family finances." Mom's face drained of all color. "Charles, you never cared about the house before. Why start now?" "Because our daughter called me last month, concerned about your behavior." Dad opened a folder of his own. "I found your transfers to Dean's account particularly interesting." The room fell silent. Even the grandfather clock I'd restored seemed to hold its breath. "Dean?" Savannah asked, confused. "Dad's college friend," I clarified. Dad slid several bank statements across the table. "Your mother has been transferring funds to him for years, including money that was earmarked for Kelly's promised equity." Mr. Pemberton cleared his throat. Given these circumstances, I cannot in good conscience proceed with the property transfer as previously discussed. The silence stretched like drying wood glue. When Dad asked if I wanted to pursue legal action against Mom and Savannah, I found myself hesitating. Would seeking maximum financial compensation bring true justice? Or would walking away completely, leaving them to face each other, be the more powerful statement? Before I could answer, Dad turned to Mr. Pemberton. I want to formally acknowledge Kelly's investment in this property. Her contributions represent significant financial and time commitments that must be legally protected. Frank, who had arrived quietly during my presentation, stepped forward. As Kelly's primary materials supplier, I can confirm both the quality and market value of these improvements. This is professional-grade work, better than most licensed contractors in the state. My business partner Julia pulled out her tablet. I've prepared before and after comparisons with current market valuations. Each renovation Kelly completed would have cost nearly twice as much if contracted commercially. Mr. Pemberton nodded, scribbling detailed notes. I recommend immediate revision of the property documents to protect Miss Monroe's interests. This situation has serious legal implications. Dad squared his shoulders. I intend to ensure Kelly receives fair compensation, regardless of Patricia's wishes. The property transfer to Savannah alone will not proceed. Across the table, Savannah's confident posture crumbled as Garrett turned to her. Did you know about this? He asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. Mom stood, grabbing her purse. I think we should continue this another time when everyone's calmer. Patricia, Dad said quietly, for once in your life, please stay and face the consequences of your actions. I noticed Mr. Pemberton now addressed his questions directly to me rather than Mom. The power dynamic in the room had shifted like a house settling on its foundation. Dad glanced toward the study door. The one room I hadn't renovated. Patricia, I think we need to have a private conversation. As they disappeared into the study, I realized I was standing taller than I had in years. 3 days later, Patricia and Savannah cornered me in the kitchen as I poured my morning coffee. Mom's silk blouse rustled as she leaned against the counter I'd installed last spring. Savannah hovered beside her, both of them blocking my exit with practiced casualness. We've been talking, Mom began, her hands trembling slightly against a marble countertop, and we think there's a reasonable compromise here. I took a deliberate sip, noting how her eyes darted to Garrett, who lingered in the doorway with his legal pad tucked under his arm. Always the attorney, even in family matters. A reduced equity percentage, Savannah offered, her voice clearly rehearsed. 15% instead of the half Dad promised. It keeps the family together, and you still get something for your contributions. Mom reached for my arm, her fingers cool against my skin. After everything I've done for you, raising you alone while your father was always working. Her voice broke with practiced precision. I never thought my own daughter would turn on me like this. Fighting us will cost more than it's worth, Garrett added from the doorway. Financially and otherwise. Mom's smile returned, thin and hopeful. We can just be a family again and forget all this unpleasantness. Isn't that what matters most? The coffee burned my throat as I swallowed. For 3 years, I'd swallowed everything else, their dismissals, their manipulation, their lies. Not anymore. I've been recording our conversations, I said quietly, setting down my mug with a solid thunk against the counter. Since the night I overheard you both through the garden window. Mom's face drained of color. Savannah's mouth opened, then closed. I pulled out my phone, tapped the screen twice, and their voices filled the kitchen. Once she's gone, we can finally renovate properly. Get a real contractor who knows what they're doing. I tapped again. Charles never has to know how much she actually put into the house. The documentation shows it all as his gifts. You can't, Savannah started. I can, and I did. I pocketed my phone. And that's not all. Remember Adam's historic properties? They hired me last month after seeing this kitchen. The one you told your friends was designed by a professional from Portland. Garrett stepped forward. Kelly, let's be reasonable. I've secured 3 major contracts in the last month alone. My company's booked solid for the next year. I looked directly at Mom. And I bought property on Willamette Street last week. My own place, with my own money. Their expressions shifted from confidence to confusion to dawning panic. "I don't need this house," I continued, feeling lighter with each word. "I just needed you to face what you've done." The back door opened. Dad walked in, holding a manila envelope, his professor's posture unusually straight. "I've signed the papers, Kelly. My portion of the property rights are legally transferred to you, effective immediately." Mom's gasp echoed through the kitchen. "Charles, you can't." "It's done, Patricia." His voice was quiet but final. I led them all to the living room, the showcase of my renovation work. Family photos I'd carefully preserved and displayed lined the walls. The custom built-ins I'd constructed framed the fireplace. The hardwood floors I'd spent weekends refinishing gleamed in the afternoon light. Without a word, I began removing only what I had personally built or restored. The side table with hand-carved details. The reading lamp with a base made from reclaimed wood from our old barn. The floating shelves that had taken 3 weekends to perfect. By the time I reached the fireplace, half the room's furnishings were gone. "What are you doing?" Mom's voice pitched higher as I knelt before the mantelpiece, the one I'd carved for her birthday last year, decorated with roses matching her garden. I unscrewed the first brass fitting. "Taking what's mine?" "You can't take that. It's part of the house now," Patricia protested, stepping forward. I removed the custom mantle, revealing the old, cracked one beneath. "I'm not taking anything that isn't mine. I'm just no longer giving it away." Dad cleared his throat. "Patricia, I'll be initiating divorce proceedings this week. I've already updated my will." Mom sank onto the couch, her perfect posture finally broken. I turned to Savannah, whose eyes had gone wide and wet. "The house is yours now," I told her, hefting the mantle under my arm. "Let's see what you build." Outside, Frank waited by his truck to help load my belongings. As we worked, I overheard whispers from neighbors about Patricia moving in with Dean, while Dad had already looked at an apartment downtown. My phone buzzed that evening, Savannah's name on the screen. I silenced it, continuing to arrange my tools in their new space. There would be time for that conversation, but not today. A week later, the state attorney's office called about financial settlement negotiations. I listened to their terms, made my counteroffer, and hung up feeling strangely peaceful. When a knock came at my new front door, I wasn't surprised to see Dad's familiar silhouette through the glass. He handed me a handwritten letter without a word, then helped me position the reclaimed dining table in what would become my new home, built with my own hands, on my own terms. 1 year later, sawdust danced in the sunlight streaming through my workshop windows. I traced my fingertips across the cherry wood tabletop I'd been sanding for hours, the silky smoothness confirming it was ready for staining. Behind me, 2 of my employees debated the merits of different joinery techniques for a Victorian restoration project we'd landed last month. "Miss Monroe," Ethan called from across the workspace, "the Sutherland invoice needs your signature." I straightened up, rolling my shoulders back. "Just leave it on my desk. I'll get to it before lunch."
No hesitation.
No seeking approval. No second-guessing whether I deserved to be the one making decisions. The Monroe Restoration and Construction logo gleamed on the wall above my workbench, not hidden in a corner or apologetically small, but proudly displayed where every client saw it first.
My phone rang.
I answered without checking who was calling, something I never would have done a year ago when every call might have been Mom with another manufactured emergency. "Monroe speaking. Kelly, just calling to confirm we're still on for dinner tonight." Dad's voice sounded different these days, lighter, with genuine warmth that made me smile. "Wouldn't miss it, Dad." I hung up and turned back to my project wall, where photographs of completed restorations covered the reclaimed barnwood I'd installed myself. Each one represented a milestone, tangible proof of what I could build with my own hands. The knowledge sat comfortably in my chest now, no longer requiring external validation. 3 months later, I stood on the stage of the community center I'd helped renovate last summer, accepting the Eugene Historical Society's Preservation Excellence Award. The wood of the plaque felt substantial in my hands. "We're so impressed by your work on the Fairview District homes," the society president said. "Do you have family here supporting you tonight?" A year ago, I would have stammered excuses for Mom's absence. "My father is here," I said instead, nodding toward Charles in the front row. He's been my biggest supporter. When I stepped down from the podium, several developers approached with business cards. I spoke with confidence about load-bearing walls and period-appropriate materials, about respecting a home's history while preparing it for the future. My father's watch, the one he'd promised I'd receive when you truly come into your own, felt right on my wrist, like it belonged there. Later that week, I hosted a small gathering at my new home, a craftsman bungalow I'd purchased with my business profits. Frank, Charles, and my business partners raised glasses. In the dining room, I'd restored myself. To building things that last, Charles said. Relationships included. Frank cleared his throat and handed me a small wooden box. This belonged to my father, he said. 30 years I've had it, waiting for someone who'd appreciate it properly. Inside rested a hand-carved marking gauge from 1942, the brass inlay still gleaming. The following morning, I spread blueprints across my workshop table. The community project proposal outlined a program to renovate homes for single parents, providing stable housing while teaching basic maintenance skills. My phone pinged with an email confirming I'd be teaching a masterclass on historical restoration next month. Need financial planning help with the expansion? Charles asked, reviewing the business projections I'd drafted. I'm volunteering my services. I smiled, thinking of David, the architectural photographer I'd been seeing, who proudly showed my restoration photos to friends at dinner parties. I lifted a framed photograph, just Dad and me standing beside the first house I'd ever helped restore, and hung it on my workshop wall. As I stepped back to admire it, a question formed in my mind. As I hung that photo in my own space, built with my own hands, I wondered if some family ties are worth preserving while others need to be renovated completely. What would you do? Try to rebuild what was broken with Savannah and my mother, or focus on strengthening the foundations that proved true when tested?